And so what I decided on was the political language that we use and how we kind of morph it for different audiences and what does that mean for teenagers.
Welcome to Quadcast. Today, we'll be hearing from Glennis Woosley. Glennis is an incoming journalism major at Northwestern University and a current senior at Nixa High School in Missouri. She has served as editor-in-chief of Wingspan, her school's news magazine, for the past 2 years. Last year, she earned the School of the New York Times News Writer of the Year Full Ride Scholarship, and Wingspan was ranked the second best high school news magazine in the nation. Outside of journalism, Glennis enjoys playing the bass guitar and watching horror movies. Welcome, Glennis. I didn't realize you liked horror movies.
I got really into horror movies, I think during COVID, where there was like a sense of stress and eeriness just like within modern day life. And so I wanted to watch something that was more stressful than my actual life.
Do you have any favorite horror movies?
I don't have specific favorite horror movies, but I have like favorite subgenres within the genre. So I love like death games and I also love home invasions.
Hmm.
Those ones feel much more real, especially because I live in the woods, so that
Mm.
doesn't help with the nerves. But the death games I think are really interesting because they can be really creative.
So, speaking of living in the woods, let's talk about Missouri and your high school.
Yeah.
Tell me about the population of your town and your school newspaper in the context of that.
Yeah, so our town actually, someone asked me this, like, a year or 2 ago, and I way underestimated our population. I think I said something like 10,000, and we're actually, like, 25,000, but we've slowly been increasing over the years, and we're around 25,000 people, but we're mainly families. Our community has 1 middle school and 1 high school. We have about 2,000 students, and our student publication itself, we have 13 students, and last year we had 18. That
On the
is
publication, on the
yeah,
staff.
and our
Okay.
publication is it's a quarterly magazine, but we also regularly update our Nixa journalism website, and so any, like, quick turnaround stories, whether recently, like, walkouts that were happening at neighboring schools, if we were covering something like that, it would be quick turnaround, and it would be
Mm.
on the website instead of the magazine. But I think the part that is so strange for us is that a lot of the schools that, like, for example, we compete against with journalism, their school sizes are around like 1,500 students. So they
Mm.
tend to be smaller than our high school, and yet their staffs can range from around 30 to like 50 or 60. In comparison, our team is very small, but we're also covering um, a larger group of people and for a larger audience, which is really difficult to do with such a small team.
What got you interested in journalism in the first place?
Yeah. Actually, I was just talking to someone about this because we just got new staff members at semester, and someone was like, "Oh, is your entire life journalism?" And I was like, "No, but kinda." Um, so what happened was I have this strong belief that your freshman year of high school, you should try everything that you are interested in. Because as you get further and further into high school, you will have less time to do those things. And so I was coming back from COVID and I was very deprived of like communicating with other people. And I loved talking. And that stemmed from the fact that when I was little, I grew up with it's called apraxia of speech. Basically, my mouth and my brain weren't synced up, and so I couldn't formulate sounds. So the way that I always describe it is just I learned English wrong, and yet I had no fallback language to go to. And so that meant that I spent, I think it was around 7 years in speech therapy, retraining my brain and my mouth. But that also meant that I spent 7 years just watching people talk to each other and not being able to talk myself. And then COVID happened only just a couple years later, and all of a sudden I had nobody to talk to. So coming back after that, I knew that I needed to do activities where I could just talk at people. So I chose speech and debate journalism, like FBLA and some business stuff. And I initially was like really heavy into speech and debate. It was perfect for what I wanted because it was just a judge sitting there and I could just talk at the judge for 10 minutes straight. But our school, we split up journalism in a weird way. So you don't go straight into the publication. You do a year of intro where you do all sides of journalism. So I did my year of intro. It was very fine because you don't really do a ton of stuff with it. You just do like a tiny bit of everything. And so then my sophomore year, when I joined Wingspan, our publication, and I got to go out and interview people, I realized that I didn't necessarily like talking at people. I like talking with people. And from there, journalism just kind of took over. I took on some really strange stories that needed to be told that people weren't doing.
Yeah, it's interesting that your desire to talk to people then morphed into one of your specialties is interviewing people. What were some of the first weird stories that you covered?
Yeah, so the first story that I was on, we didn't really define what the story would be. Essentially, it was like a couple months away from the 2024 election, and someone was like, "We need to do a story on the election." So all they wrote on the backboard was Trump and like big bold letters. And I was like, I
Mhm.
want to do that story. Didn't know what I was going to do with it. And the problem with the quarterly magazine is you can't do any like you can't easily do a story that is immediate because by the time it comes out, it's already irrelevant. And so what I decided on, because I kept just landing back on this one underlying like topic, was the political language that we use and how we kind of morph it for different audiences and what does that mean for teenagers. And so I went a very different direction with the story than originally just giant like Trump up there on the board. And I came back with the story and I gave it to our editor in chief at the time and I was like, warning you, this is not anything like a normal election story. Like, I don't know if this will work. I'm hoping it does. And she came back to me and she was like, oh, this works great. Like, we'll use it. And then our advisor got it. And that was the thing that she latched onto.
In a
And so then
good way
after,
or a bad way?
good way, good way.
Okay.
If it was a bad way, I think I would have like gone straight back into just like basic like club stories or something. But because
Mhm.
I went a different route with it and they thought it was significant and important to our community, especially because I think what really drove that story itself was the focus of teenagers. And that was kind of what I really wanted to do was target our reporting onto our community more. Because a lot of what we were doing were more just like broad feature stories about like trends that were happening and other stuff. And I think that's relevant, but there's also other things that are relevant to teenagers, even if it is something that we kind of say that teenagers think are boring, which is like politics. It's actually super relevant to them. So, how do you connect with them and kind of add their voice into the mix? Which is one thing that I really love doing is combining old people and young people's voices together 'cause old
Huh.
people can, like, tell you what they have
It's kind of like
changed.
me and you right now,
Yeah,
the
it
old and
is.
the young.
Well, I don't you're not old, but it's so fun to do because the older folks tend to have changes that they've seen throughout the years. So, like, let's say you have an old poli-sci professor, he's seen changes in politics for years and years and years, and you have a new teenager who's, like, voting for the first time. They have very different perspectives on the topic, and
Mhm.
I think that with, like, the professor in that situation, he can tell you what he's seen and what he thinks has changed, but you don't really know for sure with younger generations until you talk to them themselves. And the
Mm.
combination of those voices is really what drives a lot of our pieces nowadays.
Has your leadership guided the newspaper in that direction?
Yeah, big time. So when I was just a sophomore, we did get second place nationally that year as well. But then on the international stage, I think we were only like top 20 or top 30. And so my following year's goal was to keep at least second place nationally and hopefully be in the top 10 internationally. And we did that. And we won what's called like the Gallup Award, which is just a
Hmm.
really big fancy award that like the top high school publications get. And what happened for, I think, the transition from my sophomore year to my junior year, where it was me as a staff writer to me as editor in chief, was that the entire team almost flipped over because we had a team of almost all seniors. They all left. And then we brought in an entirely new team of sophomores. And I think that getting like a combination of people who know what they're doing, but only a couple of them, to an entirely like new faces everywhere you look kind of environment was needed because we hit a stalemate with where we were in the rankings, and all of a sudden we had all these new students who didn't really know what they were doing, and I was showing them the connection between the older people, the younger people. How do you work with a quarterly publication compared to a newspaper? Because again, quarterly like magazines are very like strange to work with. We always joke that we're like a season ahead because you're working on the fall issue, and like summertime you're working on the winter issue during fall. Like you're always off by a season. Everything feels
Right.
all like wonky. And just an entirely new set of people that we really pushed for them to get out into the field, interact with community members. Honestly, like to some extent, I would love to take all the credit for that, but like I don't truly know why it happened the way it did. It was
Mm.
mainly just a lot of my perspective on how do you report and how do you connect with those community members, and knowing what like Nixa wants just got reflected back onto the team, and the team rolled with it and the directions that they went. And nowadays, everyone kind of has like a direction that they go with things. So, one guy on our team, he loves to go to protests. So, if there's ever a protest story, he's at it. It's really crazy to me because he'll just like send us photos in the like middle of the night, and he's at like some protest taking photos. There's another person on our team who he graduated last year, but he was super into sports, and so he was the guy always taking sports photography and pictures. I think another thing was that we all actually nowadays want to go into journalism
I mean, if there were ever a time to make a difference through journalism, it's now, right?
big time. Also, a big thing is we've all grown up in a world that's very heavily political. When I was in third grade, that was the 2016 election. So Trump got elected when I was in third grade, and I've only really seen and been aware of this level of political turmoil. And same with the rest of my team, because the rest of my team is all younger than me. So our perspective is just kind of this is how we play our part, and something that we find very necessary for like everyone around us to understand and what's happening to them. And Nixa is also a weird place to do reporting in because there's not really an official like Nixa newspaper or anything. So the news truly does come from the students within our community. And I think that makes
That's really interesting. I don't know if we ever really talked about that.
we're a suburb of this bigger, like the third biggest city in Missouri, Springfield. And in Springfield, they have like two or three like local papers. And so sometimes they'll come out to Nixa and do a story on us. But a lot of times it's only like one big giant story. So a couple
Hmm.
years ago, Nixa was banning books in our high school, and they came out and started interviewing all the students and stuff. But other than that, a lot of things just kind of go under the rug and we just get to cover it ourselves.
Let's go to that book, banning series of events. You spoke at a community event and you used your platform in a very creative way.
Yeah, so this was my freshman year. So they had been banning books for a year already, and I was in 8th grade at the time, and I had an older sister in high school. So I'd heard about it, but I hadn't seen it just yet. And the minute I got into high school, I mentioned before that I was like really heavy in the speech and debate world for a little bit. A lot of the seniors on the speech and debate team were a part of a group called Nixa Students Against Book Restrictions, where they would go to school board meetings and voice their opinions about books that were being voted on if they would be banned or not. And so, because my friends were in the group and I strongly believe in free speech and like access to read and important aspects of like providing people the opportunity to achieve social mobility. I think one of the easiest and like key ways to move up in society is through education, and preventing people from getting books is very, very detrimental to people's ability to move up in society or choose paths that they want to go down. So I joined Nixa Students Against Book Restrictions, Nixa Saber for short, and they were voting on a set of books including Mouse, which is a part of our freshman English curriculum.
But you were 14 when this happened.
Yeah, and Mouse is I don't know if you're like I wasn't aware of it until they brought it up because it was only a part of the non-honors English curriculum, so I hadn't heard of it until they were, like, voting to ban it, and it's, a graphic novel depicting the Holocaust with characters that are drawn as mice, and it's a really good book.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it was a part of it is still is part of our English curriculum for freshmen, and some parent brought it up as something that they were concerned about, and so what we decided for Nix to Save Our Students was that we had enough of us, and there was like, it was a perfect amount for the amount of books that they had. So each student spoke on a different book to voice all of our views, but you only have about 3 minutes, 3 or 2 minutes to go up and, like, speak, and I knew that among all of the other student speeches that, like, mine would just blend right in. So, instead, I thought about, like, the journalism perspective and what they would be looking for, which at the end of the day is quotes and pictures. And because mine was gonna be just another student speech, I knew that I needed to get a picture for them. So, we had our speech and debate shirts that year. They were these purple shirts with hot pink lettering, and on the back, it said "Speak Up," and I had short hair at the time, so I put on the shirt, knew that at the very least it is a student and clearly a student speaking to our school board with "Speak Up" on her back. That is
Brilliant.
eye-catching and perfect for a photo. So, that's what I did, and within, like, a couple days, there was, like, 1 or 2 different news articles from the Springfield newspapers with that photo accompanying it, and then after that, we as students started getting tons and tons of interview requests. I think
Wow.
yeah, some of the biggest ones we got I wasn't a part of this one, but I swear there was one point where, like, an NPR reporter reached out to someone on our team. There was a woman from The New Yorker who came out afterwards, and there was a lot going on. It was
That's
stressful, but
amazing.
cool.
So, what ended up happening with the book bans?
Yeah.
From what you said, Mouse is still in the curriculum, so you must have had some success.
Yeah, so all the books up until that point had been banned, but that was the last official wave of book bans, so I'll take that as a win. And a lot of times the school board and some of the parents in our community, they would voice it as that they weren't banning the books, but they would restrict them, which
Mhm.
meant that some of these books, instead of them just being taken off of the shelves, they'd be put into like back rooms where a parent would have to agree on a Google form that their student could, like, check out the book, which would be fine if, 1, the books like, we already had a system that was like that. If you did not want your kid reading the book, you could have called in, and also the books that were getting targeted a lot of times had LGBTQ and, like, race aspects to the books. So the way that I always put it is that it's hard to not connect the dots on why some of those books were targeted. In the end, they stopped with the book bans, but, like, they're still restricted, the ones that were banned.
I worked in admin at a school briefly, and they did the same thing. Instead of banning the books, they restricted them. And I remember in the library,
Mhm.
the head administrators, they put the books on a shelf. It was called something like there was a book called Sparkle Boy, and they put it on the same shelf as How to Talk to Your Kids About Death. Like you said, the restriction the restriction was like a loophole for the banning, but everybody knew what it really meant.
Yeah, it was strange. Afterwards, I remember a lot of my friends actually went to Barnes& and Noble and started buying all the banned books that had been banned at our school, and I think that actually through banning those books, it led to more students reading them, even if it
Yeah,
wasn't
it
through our
makes them
library.
desirable to people who to curious minds, and that's what reading and education is. It's about curiosity. That's
Mhm.
why I'm doing this show. It's because I agree with you. Education is the key.
Yeah.
Reading is the key. I want to talk to you about your New York Times scholarship. Weren't you the first one to receive the full tuition award to the New York Times program?
Yeah, so, basically, I'm a super competitive person, and I think that when it came to journalism contests, ours happen 2nd semester. So, this was my junior year, and I knew that I wanted to rack up as many journalism awards as I could before I applied to college. And so what I did essentially was I found every single contest that I could that we were already competing in. And I found even extra ones so that, like, we went and, like, swept some of the local tournaments too, and I felt really bad, but, like, that's okay. Like, it made us get more attention, and I think that was really important to me too, was 1, I wanted to rack up awards for myself, and 2, I wanted us to rack up awards to get more people looking at the work that we were doing. But one of the contests that we already did was called Quill and Scroll, and we do it's like the multimedia contest where there's writing, design, videos, and then also like packages where it's like all of those things put together. And there was this one like category that I hadn't seen the previous year that was called news writer, and I was like, that's perfect. I wrote like so much news. I'll go for it. And I started looking up other people's portfolios online to see like previous winners, and there hadn't been. And I was so confused because essentially they have like a number for each of these categories, and it was the number like 16 or something. And the previous year, they had all their winners, and they were missing number 16. And it wasn't even like they were missing newswriter. They were missing like 15, 17. It had been taken away completely. And I didn't know the context. I was like, okay, so maybe they'll do that again this year. At the very least, like, I just need to submit something. So they had like a one sentence description talking about how they wanted to see news stories that were relevant to your community. So what I did with my portfolio is I wrote little descriptions with every story that I had done, relating it back to the community and why it mattered. So like one of my articles was about essentially teenagers, not even teenagers, little kids growing up with iPads. And what does that mean for like their cognitive developments? And my explanation why that connected to our community is that we're a family-based community. There's a lot of kids, and these parents want to know what's happening and understand why their kids are behaving the way that they are. Very simple explanation. Had no idea if it would work. I really thought it wouldn't. And then I came into class one day, and my advisor pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, so I got some really good news for you." And I instantly was like, "Oh my God, like I won this other thing. I thought I had won something else. There was no way I was winning newswriter." And then she told me that I was a finalist for the newswriter stuff. And of course, because I wasn't even thinking newswriter, I stopped everything I was doing. And I was like,
Mm.
what? So then afterwards, what they did was that Quill and Swirl decides their winners. But the New York Times got to decide an individual student from the finalists to be the full ride recipient. So within like a week later, I was on like a Zoom call with one of the people from the school of the New York Times, and he was just interviewing me about why I did journalism. And I had like a really set story about why I got into journalism and my apraxia of speech and like kind of just where it led me and why I enjoy what I want to do and what I'm going to do with it. And like, I don't know, you just can tell that someone really likes the story. And I was like, okay, I think I would it, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. And we weren't going to find out until we were in Seattle at this conference. And
Mm.
so I got an email from the people at the School of the New York Times, and they were like, stop by our booth on the first day that you get here. And so we get there, and I stop by the booth, and I'm talking to them, and I'm expecting something. Either it's like a yes or a no, and it's nothing. Like they didn't tell me the first time I stopped by. So we leave to go to lunch. I'm kind of freaked out. It's me and like 3 sophomores, and I was like, okay, I can't panic because if I panic, then that's gonna like ruin this whole trip. And then I get another message asking me to come back like the next day. And they pull me aside into like a separate room, and they're like, okay, so you won the like news writer of the year. And I was like, oh my God.
I want to get to what you did in the program too, because that was really interesting.
So what happened with that one was that when you're at like the school of the New York Times, you're staying at Fordham, but they bring over New York Times professors to do their lessons. And I was in the investigative class, and while we were there, my team, we were trying to come up with like a topic because we had to create an investigative pitch. And someone
Mm.
on our team was like, "Oh, have you ever heard of this one guy?" And his name's Nityananda, and he runs what's called like a micronation, and like the exact location of it isn't quite known. And so we just start looking up who this is because we weren't thinking investigative pitch. We were honestly just goofing around in the back of the class. just confused by who this guy is. And as we're looking him up, we start finding all of these like random records that were out there about these like agreements and like treaties with indigenous groups in Bolivia. And the
Hmm.
thing is, our group, we were super lucky because one of the people in our group, two people in our group spoke different languages. And so they were like trying to translate all of these treaties just for fun. And so we started trying to look into all of these people. And in the end, we reached out to, I think, around like 80 people in a week. I'm just trying to put together this pitch for fun. And while we were reaching out to people, one of the people who's like a part of that micronation, she kind of works under Nityananda in particular. She sent us a cease and assist letter. It was like, stop
Wow.
investigating this. And so we stopped reaching out to them specifically and just started trying to find more and more records. But in the end, we put together an investigative pitch. Yeah, that was a fun experience.
Northwestern journalism was the perfect fit for you in so many ways. Tell me about your summer experience there.
Yeah, so Northwestern has this summer program called the Medill Journalism Institute. We
Mhm.
all just call it Cherubs, but it's a summer journalism program that's a month long with around 90 students that all go to Northwestern for that month, and they take lessons and courses from journalism professors at Medill and other journalism experts, whether they're in the field or they teach at other schools. And honestly, it really, from my experience, that program filters a ton of students into Northwestern, where afterwards we loved the experience so much that everyone was like, oh, I just want to go to Northwestern. And so a lot of us now are all heading off to the same school, but it was very perfect in the sense that what they did was that they split up the 90 of us into like respective groups. And each of us got a specific instructor. And throughout the 4 weeks you were there, you'd meet with that instructor once a week to go over all of your work. And that instructor would give you advice on what you're doing well and just like life advice too. And so that was, I think, really perfect because at the time, I had spent the last month traveling and doing different summer programs, and I was stressed out of my mind. And the first meeting I had with them, remember this piece of advice he gave me because I still work with it because it was so perfect for the timing and just who I was and who I am. But he said some comment about how I didn't need to prove myself while I was there because I already got in. And so by the time I was applying to Northwestern, I was like, you know what? I got into Cherubs. Like Northwestern would be lucky to have me and I would love to get in. But like I know what I'm doing and it's okay. And whether they take me or not is like not a fault of my own.
Well, that's a really great attitude to have, especially because you've already had so many experiences and successes under your belt, like out in the real world. Your student paper is doing basically the job of a town newspaper, and you're the editor in chief. And you've just been out there in the community covering important events, life-changing events. And I had that experience with you too. You just always exude confidence and positivity and like an openness to fail. It just says so much about you.
See, that one's always been so funny to me because I'm a very, I wouldn't necessarily say emotional person, but I react big when there's something big
Mm.
happening, whether it's like a big world event or something, like I have an emotional response to it. But I can
Mhm.
still work with my emotions while like I'm going through them. And I think that when it comes to criticism and feedback of my work, a lot of times I start kind of beating up on myself. And it's always been strange to me because I always think that I'm not the best at taking feedback, but I know at the same time that even while I'm beating up on myself, I'm still like listening. And there comes a point where I just like stop beating up and I'm just listening to everything someone has to say and then sit with it for like an hour or two and then I can put it together.
Can you tell me what you produced at the Cherubs program?
Yeah, so while you're there, I'm gonna try to like keep it a little bit vague because I try to keep like most of the experience like surprises until you're there.
Mm.
But you kind of get a taste of a lot of different things, but then you get to choose which ones you go more in depth on. So they make you write like an opinion piece. They make you write some features and news and other things. They also make you do some quick turnaround stories. And then, oh, the one big one that they this is very public. Is that you go out on 4th of July and you go into Evanston, the local town, and Evanston has this giant 4th of July parade. And you just go down there for a couple hours and you interview people, take photos, come back and write a story in just a couple hours. And that experience, I think, is always very stressful for people. I know for me personally, I thought I would go in and do great. And then I went in and bombed really badly.
Oh,
Well, I think what it was for me was that I had done some quick turnaround stories and done well with them before I got there. And then when I got there, and this was also, by the way, first week of the program, 4th of July is. So everyone's kind of stressed out. You're tired. You're trying to figure out what's happening. And that's the reason why my advisor gave me the advice of like, you don't need to prove yourself sort of deal, was because I was already like losing my mind after I bombed this story. And I honestly didn't bomb it. It just didn't have a clear, concise message with it. Where I initially went there and I was going to try to interview all these like musical acts. And while I was interviewing people, I met some of these acrobats and they were so nice and their interviews were some of the best interviews I got, but they weren't musical acts. So I tried adding it into the story, and of course, that defeated the whole point of the musical act story I wanted to go for. And I just kind of lost the central point of the story. But my experience at the 4th of July parade itself, I think, overruled that experience, like the bombing part of the essay itself, or like the article itself. Because while I was there, interacting with people, I was down by the float section before they'd even let off. And so I was interviewing all these students that were like from the cheer team, dance team, band. And then I started
you
talking.
mean Northwestern students or?
No, 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 the local high school students.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And got to a point where I'd interviewed most of the musical like acts. So I was standing off at the side next to all these houses, and all these residents of these houses start coming out of the houses. And so I start talking to all of them, and they were very nice. And they were telling me their experiences of seeing the parade every year. By the time I was leaving, I remember like with my camera, my bag, and everything, and I'm like looking around, and everyone starts seeing me leave, and they're all waving me goodbye as I'm like heading down along the parade path. And it was so weird where I was like, man, I'm not even a part of Northwestern and Evanston yet. And yet the community is so like welcoming and lovingly like accepting me in. And it kind of reminded me of Nixa itself, where I was like, man, they're so open to welcome like a journalist who is just here to report for them. And as much as like I love doing big national stuff, I also really like just connecting with a community. We're all important and stories need to be shared, even if it's just feel good stories.
This is your first investigative piece about
Oh,
the lynching data?
yeah, yeah.
Tell me
So
about that.
that article was strange during my sophomore year when I was a staff writer and most of the team was all seniors. One of our team members really wanted to do a story about why our community lacked diversity, which I absolutely agree. We are primarily white. We don't have much diversity around here. And if you compare it into like Springfield, Springfield has more diversity, but they still also don't have much in certain areas of Springfield. So she wanted to do a story about why our community lacked diversity. And I think that that is a really interesting piece to look into and understand why. But the story never came to be that year. And so a year later, we were trying to decide spring topics. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take on this story. Like, we're going to see what happens. If the answer is we don't know, so be it. At least that in itself is also a story. And so initially, what we thought the reason why our community lacked diversity is that there were these lynchings over a century ago that happened in Springfield, which were located in the Springfield Square. And so I started just investigating the Springfield Square and what it was. And then while I was looking into that, I really wanted to find specific numbers on the Black population within Springfield. And while I was looking at them, so the lynching happened in, I think it was 1906 or 1905. But the data, the Census Bureau data, was only from 1900 to 1910. So we
Hmm.
didn't know the exact like year and how it shifted. But if you looked between 1900 to 1910, there was only like a 500% decrease. It went from about 3,000 to 2,500, which in the grand scheme of things, like that's a lot of people, but that's also not a lot of people. Um, and I was really confused because, like, if you look at the like the data nowadays, I forget the exact number, like the percentage of our population being Black, I think it was, like, somewhere around, like, 1 to 4%, it's low.
Hmm.
So, like, 2,500 people in a city that is, like, starting to grow, but, like, it didn't make sense to me, like, I just thought that it would go down to, like, 0. So, while I was looking into it, I interviewed this professor at Missouri State University, Dr. Brooks Blevins, and he teaches a course on the history of the Ozarks, and while I was interviewing him, I asked about that data because I was like, "I feel like this should have decreased more within those years." And so I asked him about it, and he actually had been doing this project with a group of students where they had been collecting population data all the way going back to like 1860 or something with every single like county in the Springfield area. So we started comparing the data to figure out what had happened. And especially the part that confused me the most was that all of the local papers in the Springfield area had recently done a story on the lynching, and all of them said that the Black population right after lynchings had dropped to 1%. And so that's the reason why I was especially confused, was because the numbers that I was looking at weren't 1%. It
Yeah,
was
it
like,
didn't match what they were saying.
no, it didn't. So I went to that professor and we started looking through stuff. Essentially, what had happened was a small portion of the Black population in Springfield actually did leave after the lynchings, but a large
Hmm.
group of them had actually stayed. There's two likely situations and like scenarios. Is before the lynchings had happened, Springfield was actually pretty connected in terms of like whites and blacks, where there were like black businesses and there was a black man on the city council and a lot of like integration for that time and that era. And so then after the lynchings happened, the problem was that the white population still depended a ton on the black population economically. So they couldn't really chase the entire black population out of Springfield because they were
Hmm.
relying on each other too much. So what happened was they basically just segregated completely. So the black population was doing their own thing and the white population was doing their own thing, but they were still relying on each other probably financially in that sense. But
Hmm.
at that point, like the black city council man didn't like run for it. He didn't either didn't run for it again or he didn't get it again. But they were living very separate lives until like I think it was, oh my gosh, this was like a year ago since I read the story, but it was like 1980s or 1990s until they got like another black city councilman, which almost took 100
Wow.
years. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was a really strange story because I think I didn't go into it with an investigative mind. I was just confused why all these articles said 1% and the data didn't say 1%. So, I just wanted to check.
Even though you didn't go into it as an
Mhm.
investigative reporter, you uncovered a mistake.
Yeah.
In the Northwestern summer program, Cherubs, were there any Northwestern professors that you formed a great working relationship with?
Yeah. Big time. So I can't name all of them because there's so many professors. My experience with like the instructors there is that you get close with your instructor. And my instructor was John Kupetz. He's not a professor at Northwestern anymore, but he has like a massive legacy at Cherubs because he's been working there for 3 decades.
Hmm.
I think the big one for him and the way that we bonded was that he would handwrite all of his edits and he'd do it in green ink and he also would write in cursive. And a lot of us as like younger people don't really know how to read cursive. And so
Mhm.
we started like taking photos of his edits and putting them through AI to figure out what he wrote. And the first time we did it, it came back as like Arabic. And like there was something that we all bonded over.
There's something about having to decipher someone's handwriting that like reveals something about them.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I think everyone would freak out when they'd first get their edits back because it would mostly be like change all of the story kind of like edits you'd
Mhm.
see. And when I'd first get them back, I'd be freaking out internally. And then my like freak out would tone down as I try to decipher his words, even if it was like change half of the story, it's this thing instead, because my main focus was just trying to figure out what he wrote. Yeah, so there was Karen Springer, J.A. Adonde, Dr. Greenwell. There was a lot. Like, there was, I think, close to like 10 instructors, and each
Mhm.
of them would do a separate lesson. So, J.A.
Mm.
Adonde, he does a lot of sports reporting, and I didn't know this at the
Mm.
time because I'm not into sports reporting myself, but I guess there was all these jokes among like the cherubs that essentially at Northwestern, people fight to get into his classes and they're always like filled to the brim and he always runs out of seats because he's super well known in sports reporting.
Hmm.
He's been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame for his sports reporting. And so he's really, really impressive. And so he did a couple lessons on sports reporting and how do you do that. And somehow, as someone who's grown up with a family that does not know anything about sports, or if they do, it's not like basketball and football and stuff. He made like a subject matter that I don't know, like knowable. There was just so many different types of like lessons on like how do you do interviews? Oh, how do you create like a professional resume? There was just so anything you could come up with. We essentially did something on that. Even like a documentary
Hmm.
little lesson. There was stuff on ethics. There were 3 different sessions on ethics throughout those
Hmm.
weeks, and those ones were really fun.
Was one of those instructors who taught ethics a professor there
Mhm.
at
Um,
Northwestern?
I know that 2 of the ethics sessions were done by, Roger Boy, the guy who's in charge of Cherubs, and everyone, like, knows
Wow.
him and loves him, and then Joe, and Joe's a professor at Michigan State, and
Hmm.
so they did, like, I think 1 or 2 of the ethics sessions, and then another ethics session was Dr. Greenwell.
In any of Dr. Greenwell's lessons, did you learn about evolution of ethics, in
Oh.
this era?
So yeah, we when it came to the ethics stuff, they were different types of setup of questions. So her session was visual ethics. So
Uh-huh.
here are some photos, and a lot of the photos were more old because a lot of them like omitted things from pictures and stuff that nowadays ethically you don't do in journalism. Like you don't take out, let's say, just a photo of 2 people playing a sport, you don't omit out a like ball or something. You don't
Mhm.
add in a ball or anything like that. You can crop photos, but you don't like take something out. But then there's also all these ethics questions about like videos and broadcast and what do you show? And so we were looking at older like videos in that context, but we were also talking about nowadays, how would that apply? So at the time, ICE wasn't like out on the cities and other stuff at the time. But nowadays, if we had to talk about it, a big question would be how much do you show of some of those videos? But those
The
were
violence.
yeah, the questions that we had is like, how much do you show of violence? What do you do with the audio? Like one of the ideas proposed was that you keep the video clip, but you either make it a little bit shorter or something, and then you make the volume lower or something like that, where it's like, how do you make this tolerable for people, but also don't sugar down like the actual reality of the story? So it
Mhm.
was very cool.
At Northwestern, what will you focus on in your journalism? What are some of the issues most important to you?
Oh my gosh. So, okay, there's not like a simple answer because I have 4 different big things that I want to do while I'm at Northwestern, and 3 of them have to do with journalism. So, one, I really want to try doing documentary work. Um, I am not the biggest fan of just like straight up broadcast journalism. Like I love consuming it, but I don't like doing it myself. But I
Mm.
think with a documentary, it's a lot like the lynching story where I dive in deep and I try to uncover something. And so I'm just doing that in a more visually appealing form, which I think would be really fun to try and experiment with. And the other 2 are that I really want to try also combining data science and data work with my journalism stuff. How
Mhm.
will I do that? I don't quite know. But again, I really like data and I like how it can tell stories. And I think that human made stories mixed with data hold a stronger impact than just one of them by themselves.
You have a strong math and science background too.
Yeah, my I always say that my family's really just full of STEM nerds, and then I was like the
Mhm.
oddball out in that context. And I think it's a good thing to bring up too that a lot of people don't like math and they don't like STEM stuff, even if it's data and other things. And I think that even if you don't like it, it's like if you can make it visually appealing and make sense really easily, then that holds a story for anybody. And I
Mm.
think that's my job as someone who can think about an audience and think about the people side. but also still have that kind of math data brain is to
Mhm.
kinda connect the 2 sides of people.
What are the other 2 pursuits you hope to
The
do at
other 2.
Northwestern?
Okay, so one of them, I don't exactly know how it'll work, but I really like what the New York Times visual investigations team does, where they, let's say in like an event that is huge, US coverage everywhere, like for example, January 6th, they will download all the content that is either being streamed or videotaped or anything and post it onto social media, and then they'll create a story through that content. And I really
Mhm.
want to try doing some of that stuff while I'm in college. Consume all the content that's out there and then create the story for everyone.
Well, I
Which
feel like that approach is so helpful. It's been so
Mhm.
helpful to me and so many people because in this climate where you don't know what's true, especially as AI videos take over, that kind of journalism where it's coming from different sources and real sources it's helpful to shine a light on the truth,
Yeah.
and what really happened. You could see it with your own eyes.
I'm glad you brought up the AI aspect because I think one of the reasons why that one in particular is interesting to me is just from like a non-journalism standpoint. I wish I could I wish I could watch an AI video and be able to tell you like really confidently if it's AI or not. And
I
I think as
know.
yeah, because as more time goes on, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think I can.
It's getting harder and harder. Like I started being able to discern, but the technology keeps improving.
Mhm.
And what was
The
the last
third or the fourth one. I really yeah. So this one I think it's more just sprung up very, very recently. If I get an idea, there's like a 75% chance that I actually like do something with it. Um, I really want to try kind of doing some like fiction writing. But I want to
Mm.
try combining some genres together. So going back to like the horror movie stuff, I love the creative sides when it comes to writing things. And I think a huge aspect of bringing something new to fiction is combining things in ways that people aren't used to seeing. So,
I agree. As a fiction writer myself, I
yeah,
can't wait to see your work one day, whenever that is. Well, Glennis, thank you so much.
sure thing.
I hope you join us again after spending some time in your freshman year at Northwestern in the fall.
Thank you.